This video will discuss spoilers through patch 6.5 of Endwalker. Best click away if you want to preserve the sentiment. You have been warned. One of the most intriguing, for lack of a better word, moments in Endwalker happens right before the Dead End's dungeon, where our buddy Hades leaves us with a list of new adventures to pursue. It was a bit perplexing that we went through each one essentially back to back throughout post-Endwalker and Dawntrail, but screw the details. It was a parting gift from one of the best characters to come out of this game. Of his list of adventures to pursue, he mentions the 12 gods of Eorzea, implying them to be real. This definitely stuck out to me the most, partially because I enjoy some good mythology, but also given our character's habit of killing gods. It made me wonder if they were more bound for the chopping block. Nothing like a little deicide to get the blood flowing. Unfortunately, their story in the Endwalker Alliance raids was not as inspiring as I had hoped. As if that's anything new for Endwalker. Now, I'm not talking about the fights themselves. I'll say that now. I enjoyed Endwalker's Alliance dungeons. The settings, the battles, the music. They really outdid themselves, making these places feel unique. Years later, I still listen to In the Balance from time to time. Usually while watching Nothal do their thing, it's great. The 12 themselves all have distinguished character designs. You can tell what each one of them are about just by looking at them. Rhalgr's domineering presence as a destroyer, Azima's unfettered persona, Nofika's charm and bountiful harvest.
Hey, chicka bum bum.
There was plenty of fun with the myths raids. I don't mean to detract from that. Look, I've made something of a New Year's resolution to squeeze in more positive observations, and this channel mostly focuses on storylines I adamantly despise. So I've set myself up for failure. Should be a delightful downward spiral. I hope you'll join me for the ride. But as for the lore, the story, things get weird. Basically, the mythical gods of Eorzea were in fact creations of Hydaelyn, given form and subsisting off the beliefs of their followers. Even though the 12 argue repeatedly to not be primals, they operate very similarly to primals. Though they discuss how Dynamis plays a hand in their functions and development, best feast your eyes, folks, because after this, Dynamis becomes an irrelevant subject in the FF14 multiverse, a substance that nearly killed everything, and it's swept under the rug like that clump of dirty laundry you refuse to deal with. How delightful. Now, the 12 were created to help maintain the world's balance and its peoples following the Sundering, as well as the calamities ushered by the Scions. On the surface, this makes sense. When Venat went full Queen Daenerys,
You stupid bitch!
she obviously saw a need to curb the damage and aid humanity through the inevitable dark times, a method that can endure through millennia while providing minimal interference on the mortals. And we're starting to see some red flags. All that crap Venat spat out back at Elpis about how humanity needed to undergo hardship, that her greatest desire was to test mankind so they'd be ready to fight against despair itself. She single-handedly chose to sunder the world and allow Hades and the other two paragons to escape, knowing what would happen to empower little old us. And all because...
Yet I have faith in mankind's potential. As long as he believes in himself, there is naught he cannot achieve.
She believed in us so much, she felt the need to manufacture an entire pantheon to watch over and motivate us. With her as a figurehead, of course. There are innumerous philosophical contradictions with Venat's actions. I've already a few videos tackling everything logically inept about her strategies. The myth's storyline is no different. She believes we need to suffer to grow strong, but not suffer too much. That's in part what the 12 are for. Interesting concept, how much hardship is the right amount exactly? Because evidently Venat realized there was a line she shouldn't cross with this plan of hers, yet she held no sentiment for the unsundered world, didn't hesitate to withhold the truth of the final days. Never did anything about Hermes, knowing what an unhinged whack job he was. The ancients suffered more than we can hope to understand, and that was just how it had to be. Billions of people would suffer and die, the 7 separate reflections that would be rejoined, those people all went extinct, erased from existence, their cultures gone, their very essences broken down to their base components and refused with the source, for the sake of our future. All those others were left high and dry, only for us now, on the source, does mankind get a benevolent pack of deities to help push them through the hard times. It's also funny when you remember that Amarant had a god of their own. Zodiark, someone they turned to when the worst came to pass, when there was nothing and no one else to save them from the horrors. Horrors a certain someone refused to bring up. Do we remember how Venat lectured this group to accept the pain, accept the suffering? Then when they refused to listen, she took action herself. Yet when she assumed position as Will of the Star, this little she-witch opted to create gods of her own. Entities the mortal people would capitulate, surrender, and devote themselves to. Venat witnessed people willing to sacrifice everything to their god, their paradise. Yet she created a religion of her own that's inclined to promote the same behavior. I can assume what detractors are thinking. The Amyrtanes were going to use Zodiark to sacrifice innocence. They all surrendered to his brilliance. There was no walking back from this. It's hardly the same thing. Okay, ignoring that Venat could have alerted them to what was really going on, which would have changed everything. Her arguments why she didn't were peak moronic. Look at real-world history. How many people have murdered on behalf of their gods? Honestly, divine providence is such a regular excuse for killing. I keep a Kevlar vest on hand just in case some Mormon missionaries tread through my neighborhood. At least they're easy to spot. Jehovah's Witnesses tend to dress casually. Crafty bastards. My point is, people are going to use powerful symbols for personal gain. We do it in the real world. I doubt the gaming world is more virtuous by default. It doesn't get much delving into, but given how much catastrophe has scarred Eorzea throughout its history, I can only imagine how often the 12 have been invoked to justify atrocities. The Lambs of Dalamud were just one example. When Dalamud began its ascent, they became extremists and started committing murder and abduction. This was one single sect. Imagine how many more are out there. I am stunned Venat chose religion of all things to help inspire mankind, especially since the 12 are powered partially by Dynamis, a powerful energy source with a wide range of applications. Humanity's shifting values and desires over the centuries will be liable to influence, even corrupt the gods. It doesn't matter how disconnected they are from the mortal realm, there's no surefire failsafe to prevent them from turning into bastardized versions of what Venat had intended. 12,000 years is a lot of history for civilization to bring out the worst in itself, and any nuance that may explain away this concern is bound to be mighty contrived. Something all too common as we explore Endwalker in detail. It's even weirder when you consider that Hermes had this exact problem with the Medion. Their very presence helped invoke the doomsdays they reported back, thanks to his recklessness. And the Endsinger would proceed to decimate what other life was out there. Who is to say that the 12 wouldn't see their priorities change for the worse as humanity's did? Dynamis is a very capricious substance. What luck nothing went wrong with this plan when there is a minefield of potential issues. Repeatedly, for thousands of years.
1,000 years, huh? It's kind of a long wait. You know any jokes?
Matter of fact, I do. The unearned praise this expansion got. But all this begs another question. How had knowledge of the 12 endured all these millennia? Again, look at the real world. Religions from ancient times have gone through so many alterations and deviations, it's difficult for professional scholars to know for sure what the original concepts even were. Look at the Greek pantheon. There are some stark differences from the pre-Bronze Age collapse to the classical Greece we're all familiar with. From what I understand, Hades wasn't even a recognized deity until later on in Greece's development. So how have the 12 remained exactly 12 for so long? Granted, humanity's worship and collective concepts have helped shape them. But how is it that their concepts have remained? How have at least some of them not been virtually erased because of humanity's ever-changing consciousness and societal development? Good example, delving into the lore a bit, during the Allegan Empire was a period of great scientific development where knowledge and information was the accepted standard, while religion took a back seat. It wasn't banned, but it was unpopular. Then consider how a single massive earthquake leveled their civilization, enough to bury even the Crystal Tower, a colossal construct. How would knowledge of the 12 survive such a calamity, especially after an era where religion was not commonly practiced? Not to mention the several other calamities in coming centuries, and exactly 12 members of the Pantheon. Always 12. The only explanation I could think of is that Hydaelyn would have had to manipulate humanity to keep these gods of hers omnipresent, as well as prevent any other major religion from moving in and usurping them, which again, with all these civilization-ruining events that have occurred, is extremely likely to have happened, especially when you remember that the 12 don't operate directly. Very little, if any, interference with the people. Thinking along these lines, one might argue Venat looks worse than before. This woman sought to subvert cultural development for hundreds of generations, all to ensure that this pantheon, her pantheon, reigns supreme. Who knows how this insistence has impeded humanity's growth? Eorzea may well have moved beyond religion as a primary source of strength and virtue were it not for her actions. It almost happened during Alec's reign. It's only after the Ascians are stopped and the final days are subverted that Hydaelyn chooses to let go, and so do the 12 in turn. It's just amazing how we're only allowed to develop beyond her specifications when it fits her specifications. To bind a society's well-being to any single ideology is prone to end in failure, no matter how well-meaning it is. How can Venat claim to believe in mankind's potential while actively interfering with its development on this level? Let's not forget, by the way, the continued debacle revolving around time travel. We did not know about the nature of the 12 when we visit Elpis. There's no way Venat could have known about them. So why did she create literal gods to watch over humanity if avoiding time paradoxes was such an issue for her? This is the same woman who actively created an escape for the paragons during the Sundering, to ensure that the Scions and all the horrors they would invoke played out. Yet moments in Endwalker where she opts to make changes outside of the lore dump we provided work in contradiction to these decisions. Why? Why was ensuring the Scions endured so important to keeping the timeline stable, but creating a pantheon under your dictation was not? Venat did command strict and non-intervention, which would limit the chances of changing anything. But that's still an awfully big risk that, again, she refused to tolerate in other more sensible moments. And 12 millennia is plenty of time to muck something up. All these contradictions make her look corrupt, selfish, power-hungry. Do keep in mind, she is the leader of this makeshift pantheon. She is a gender-bent Zeus. Read some of the less exalting stories on that guy. You will fear for your life, trust me.
Look, all I'm saying is some girls tell you they're 18, and like, what am I, some human age detecting machine?
I cannot get around the paradoxes in Venat's thinking. She wants humanity to aspire towards strength, but apparently doesn't trust us enough not to leave some higher power to help in that regard. She was clearly disturbed by the fervent devotion to Zodiark, yet she established a belief-driven system that would be bound to lead to extremism and prejudice, and would prevent progress by ensuring that system was maintained between numerous apocalyptic events. And she wanted the 12 to stick to a strict non-interference policy to avoid being too impactful, and to avoid any time travel nonsense. You can see my Venat video on how useless that angle plays out, yet Hydaelyn has other servants who aren't bound by any such rule.
Who treadeth now upon my bones, and waketh me from slumber sweet?
Yeah, we need to talk about Midgardsormr, the father of dragons, the one who awoke in the battle of the Garlean fleet, destroyed their enormous flagship, offing himself in the process. When he first arrived on the Theris, Hydaelyn offered him and his brood children sanctuary in exchange for his help when called upon. Why was Midgardsormr allowed to interfere in events but not the 12? Look, I love dragons, people. Seriously, since 1996 and Dragonheart came out. Wanted a talking dragon best friend ever since. Doubly so if it's a Sean Connery talking dragon best friend.
Hello.
But I sincerely doubt we would have mentioned them back at Elpis. So why did Venat make an exception, unaware of how such actions could interfere with her very precious timeline? And why were the 12 directed to just linger around, not helping? This battle I'm talking about happened in Mordoma, around Silver Tear Lake. And the 12 Celestial Clubhouse is right over here. You can see the Crystal Tower and the remnants of Dalamud from their perch. Midgardsormr died to lend a hand, and he was left to fend for himself, with all this backup right next door.
You team killing fucktard?
Also, this was just a prelude to the fall of Dalamud and the Seventh rejoining, something we know Hydaelyn never had any intention of stopping, meaning our boy here basically died for no good reason. Sure, death does not mean the same thing for an entity like Midgardsormr. Even now, he's still around, just sleeping, recuperating his strength. But it's also true that death does impede his ability to operate, and it takes a horribly long time to recover his strength. You know, the dragons in 14 are a very tragic tale. First, their homeworld was utterly wrecked by a race of sentient machines, forcing Midgardsormr to flee. Then on the Theris, Bahamut and Ratatoskr were slain. Nidhogg went insane, Hraesvelgr took to solitude, and Tiamat was imprisoned for millennia, just like her sister Ashdaya was imprisoned in the Void. I know this isn't today's topic. I'll probably make a separate video on this one day. My point is, the dragons have suffered more hardship than I think most people realize. And now we have Hydaelyn sitting the father of their species on what amounted to a suicide mission, an act that serves no real purpose and was a wasted endeavor. The calamity was inevitable according to Hydaelyn's will. If the goal was just to impede Garlemald, why? For all she knew, the invasion with the fleet was all part of the timeline. It makes no damn sense. All this tragedy was meant to adhere to her own machinations. And best of all, there was a group of powerful godlike entities right in the neighborhood who watched it all go down and did nothing to help him. The Dragonstar's tragedy is only amplified by the revelations in Endwalker, and you best believe I am freaking pissed off about it. Adding to the infinitesimal crap salad that is Venat's character, did she ever tell her followers the truth? So the 12 are based on the identities of Venat's splinter group, the ones who would go on to sacrifice their lives and their very souls to create Hydaelyn. I suppose in her mind, this was meant to be a tribute to her loyal followers. I mean, so that some aspects of their identities would remain. The fact she chose to revive them, so to speak, as pseudo-gods with her at the head of the pantheon is a twisted tribute, if we're being honest. But back to my question, did Venat ever tell her followers the truth of the final days? Of what she had learned about the future? Would knowledge of these facts alter their decision to work with her? These are valid concerns. Venat withheld information that would have saved lives beyond count. That she kept her followers in the dark is not out of the realm of possibility. And again, their sacrifices were permanent. Their souls were consumed in the process. There's no reincarnation for these people. Making a decision of that caliber has a hefty weight to it. And if that decision was made under false pretenses, it is infinitely worse. Had they known of the Dynamis, Meteon, Hermes, many of them may not have signed up to go this far. Or maybe they would have. We're given such a narrow lens to understand these characters, it's impossible to form thought-out critiques. All we have is Venat's side of things, and that does not help the situation. She's lied too many times, the writing does not accommodate her two-faced persona. Also remember that when she created the Watcher, another member of the Splinter group, she specifically created him with limited memories of himself in the era prior to the Sundering. Venat is factually guilty of trimming historical details, making much of what this gingerbread legalos says extra untrustworthy. She withheld a great deal and played us all like tools, repeatedly. Skepticism of every facet is warranted.
You know, I'm starting not to trust you.
What do you mean starting to?
Between the ambiguity of Venat's choices and the 12 themselves having an equally obscure purpose, it made much of the Mist storyline feel like an obligation more than anything. Hades brought them up, so the writers had to follow through on it. I barely know how to feel about their backgrounds, something we only got at the very end of the story arc. You know, firstly, Beauregard worked in the Bureau of the Architect and would often pick up the pieces thanks to his overseer, which would be Hydaelyn. Not fond of them bashing one of the only decent characters Endwalker gave us. And it doesn't sound like him. Hydaelyn was kind and an open-minded person. He was not reckless. That seems like more Azim's thing. And he certainly was not neglectful towards his duties, so that little bit kind of pissed me off. Also, I find it rather telling that several members of Venat's Splinter group consisted of people she knew and worked with personally. People she would be able to take advantage of, who wouldn't be so inclined to question her ethics when approached about this suicide pact of theirs. This is the equivalent of taking your buddies out for a drink, swearing you'll act as a designated driver, and then you reel the car off a cliff while jumping out at the last second. It may look bad, but hey, there's nobody left to question you. How convenient.
You can go back to senselessly killing yourself.
Yeah. About said suicide pact, we need to talk about the Alliance story's ending. This is what put me off from it completely. Sure, Venat's continued shadiness going unaddressed does not help. The lack of details only feeds into that. And the writer's grand plan to wrap up the 12 and simultaneously the last remnants of Venat's story, they all killed themselves to return to the planet, supposedly supplying it with a substantial boon to aid in the world's recovery. So all this fighting and stuff, all the researching their nature and learning more about these significant figures from the unsundered world, an era many of us would love to get more details on. The 12 were just testing us to see if they could retire and clock out at long last. That's it, my god. This had to be the most underwhelming and generic conclusion to a fantasy story they could have conjured up. We just learned the gods of Eorzea are real, something with colossal implications, and then they all die. And that's it. Me sideways. Why does Endwalker keep doing this? It was so determined to conclude every possible angle, to the point where it erased so much potential as a result. Hydaelyn, we have a stupid-ass conversation in the livestream, which basically amounted to a plot recap more than anything. You best stay tuned, I've got a lot to say about this scene. And nothing pleasant. And then we kill her, because there was no other way this could have reasonably gone. And it wasn't like we didn't have questions in need of answering. The Loborites, an advanced sect that claims benevolence for humanity. They could usher in a new era of scientific development. But nah, they just sit up here getting their tails flustered for a tasty carrot. Very inspiring. I've spoken of the Watcher before. He was also a disappointment. Now the 12, they die too, when there was so much more that could have been done. Say, instead of offing themselves like a cult of mentally ill patients recently escaped from the psycho ward, the 12 decide that with the cause of the final days halted and Hydaelyn's will fulfilled, they will move on to other parts of the world. Much of Atheris remains unexplored, and having the opportunity to see these entities again will be a nice investment in the future. We've yet to see Hingashi in the east, outside of Kugane. Perhaps Azima will find herself over there. She once aspired to be Azim, so adventuring to unexplored lands would be in her nature. She could adopt aspects of their local deities, adapting to the culture, or Mericidia to the south. I would love to visit that continent one day. Hell, if the planet is too narrow a scope, why not the cosmos? I complained back in my Venat rant how letting the Medion endure only guaranteed the death of whatever other life existed out there. So why not have the 12 take their gifts to the wider universe, aiding other worlds in need of their guidance? This would at least address that issue, one of a great many surrounding Venat. Endwalker gave us a literal universe of possibilities. Let us take advantage of that for God's sake. Hell, the Cosmic Exploration Zone is only a few weeks out, and it will involve crafting and gathering a perfect setting for Beauregard to hang around for a bit, just near enough to home to say hi and show us a few things. Seeing these characters spread out amongst the stars, gone but not forever, would paint a far more hopeful image, knowing that there are truly benevolent entities working to empower civilizations, instead of just dying, and ridding us of any opportunity to explore these people ever again.
He will be missed until we get a replacement, and then forgotten immediately.
I suppose Derek with a Y is still around. By the way, nice cop-out, dude. Pussing out on your suicide pact, at least your little pet feels sad about it. And now he too is a mere mortal. Imagine if the others followed suit. That too would be far more intriguing than what we got. Also, do you recall why they wanted to fight us? Yeah, to test mankind, to see if they are truly ready to stand on their own. And the 12 test that by fighting one person. Look, ignore the Alliance part of the raids. Narratively, it's just us. Never mind that. These morons are testing an entire species' value based on the abilities of one person. Sure, the 12 also say that it was us overcoming the final days that prompted them towards this decision, but that too was due to a single person, not humanity. An overpowered person with grandiose plot armor. Few others in the series ever stood so much as a chance against us, mainly Xenos and the Unsundered, not exactly a fair metric for the whole planet. This is a recurring trope, one character determining the value of an entire group. It's painfully short-sighted and only makes the 12 look like imbeciles, making up an excuse just to kill themselves. Just like their boss did, how about that? How do these fights determine anything about Atheris' people? The 12 have apparently watched over mortals for millennia. They should know the people's value and their shortcomings. Now there's also this line about fighting us being a part of dispersing their power back into the world. And like so many things in this game, it's just some conjured excuses to justify the trials and raids we go through every expansion. It's fine, just whatever. But of course, if we use logic, many of the fights in Endwalker would never have happened. It's almost embarrassing when you think about it. And another issue, why is there so bleeding many? How exactly is their task complete? Sure, the final days have stopped. Who frickin' Ray struck a pose. Hydaelyn is gone. The universe is better off, I promise. But there are multiple Ascians unaccounted for. We've killed a few, and that's just here on the source. There are multiple shards, many of which probably have awakened Ascians, all scheming to one extent or another. Just because the Paragons are dead doesn't mean their goal is too. Where are the missing Ascians? Did Vindaniel kill them? If not, why didn't they interfere in his machinations during post-Shadowbringers and Endwalker? They desire to make the world whole, not to destroy it. They would not align with him. It's a profound plot point missing from the narrative over 3 years now, and I'm kinda pissed off at how hard Square has been ignoring it. So, quick spoilers for Dawntrail. You can click to the timestamp here if you want to avoid that. Some evidence hints at the imposter Sphene we saw in 7.1 is one such Ascian, and during post-credits, when Sphene's crown is shown, it bears an image similar to an Ascian shrift. And we have seen Ascians assume the guise of killed-off characters before, so maybe they'll play a part in upcoming events, who knows. But that still raises the issue of Hydaelyn and her brigade of simps, all killing themselves, while the threat they endeavored for centuries to keep from getting out of hand is still out there. The Scions are guilty of this too. When they disbanded during Endwalker's conclusion, I specifically remember thinking, wait, that's not everything. Why are you doing this? No, you bunch of tards need to get back to work, we're not done yet. And, yes. As for our fellow Scions and the students of Baldesion, they debate withholding the truth from the general public, that the primary religion of Eorzea is a fabrication, that the 12 are real but not actual gods, and they are dead now. Yeah, our allies, dedicated towards the pursuit of knowledge and truth, so that they may forge a better world for the road ahead, are now discussing hoarding said knowledge and refusing to share it. Let's just remember that Y'shtola back in Ultima Thule proclaimed her willingness to die in the pursuit of truth and understanding. She did, in fact, die, temporarily, and now we're actively prohibiting that stated virtue of hers, because we apparently know better. A real chip off the old block. No wonder Venat felt such a connection with us.
You ever get the feeling something really bad is going to happen?
Only every single fucking time I have to talk to you.
Alright, I'm tired, pissed off, and need a big ass bottle of pills to cope with this crap heap. Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe, share your thoughts down below as always. Next on the agenda will be Hermes. And then it's back to Dawn Trail with the release of 7.2 on the horizon. I hope you all stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then.